Moriden Athluan. Historians still seek to find out more about the mer whose actions ended the Fourth Era. Many are the tales that have been told of him, and most of them seem to contradict each other.
Most know him as the fabled Dragonborn of the Fourth Era, the savior of all Nirn, the mer who restored the lost dragon blood of the Septim line of emperors to all Mandus.
Some insist that he was a cunning thief. More insist that he was a warrior without compare. Still, others argue that he was a mage of unrivaled power.
There are whispers that he was a slave to the Daedric lords. Some even claim, in tales told in the darkest corners of Skyrim, that he was a vampire lord.
Like all legends, there are bits of truth hiding among the embellishments and the exaggerations. No single telling of the legend matches any others. But there are some few things that are always the same. The truth, however. The truth is not what the bards would have you believe. Hearthfire, 4th Era, 201. I had the mid-watch sentries wake me halfway through their watch and departed the camp. Travel at night meant that I couldn't see very much, but it also meant that most of the things that might want to kill me were asleep. The ones that weren't never saw me. And so I came down off the central peaks of the rift into Shaw's Stone some 2 hours after dawn. Following the road, I eventually ran into the scouting patrol that the legate had sent, and the old sergeant from Corvinyand just happened to be the one in charge of this detachment. Wary of revealing anything the legate wouldn't want known, I informed him of the caravan and its contents. Hadvar confirmed they had been tracking such a wagon since the early morning light, and by pure fortune, the wagon had suffered a broken wheel as it had been descending the roadway. His plan was simple. Take the sentry, and then pour fire down onto the others until they were either dead or had surrendered. Simple things are sometimes best, so I agreed to the plan. Simple means there are only so many ways to screw it up. I took my position, the sentry in my sights, waiting for the order to fire. When it came, my arrow flew off the string, almost humming as it flew through the air. The sentry never knew she was under attack, the arrow piercing straight through her throat. She went down, clutching with futility at the shaft of wood that had ended her life. The rest of the Stormcloaks did not fare better. The confusion of the attack, the sheer unexpected nature of it, ensured a disorganized response. The others in the scout group had little difficulty in shooting them full of more arrows. The fight was over almost before it had truly begun. But that is the ideal when you are fighting. Never give the enemy a chance to recover. Hadvar and his men would take care of the wagon. For me, it was back to the legate with the news, though I suspect that, with those supplies out of the picture, I know what the next step will be. I knew what the orders would be. If I had the option, I could have just set up camp near the fort, waited for the Legion to show up, and saved us all a bit of time. But no. Instead, I had to walk completely across the rift to report that the caravan had been destroyed, just so that I could walk completely across the rift again to help in the assault on Fort Greenwall. It's not that I'm complaining, well, much. It's just the inefficiency of it all. Anyone could tell that the fort had to be the logical objective. Why not just take care of it while we were there? So, once again, I had the mid-watch sentries wake me halfway through their watch, and once again, I took to the road, this time heading for Fort Greenwall, and battle against the Stormcloaks. If they don't see this coming, well, I didn't have high opinions of their intelligence anyhow, but if they don't see this coming, it will, somehow, drop even lower. 17 Hearthfire, 4th Era, 201. Traveling through the early morning hours, I avoided all notice as I again crossed the length of the rift. Dawn broke shortly before I met up with the troops on the south side of the fort, only a few miles north of Shore Stone. We checked our gear one last time, waiting, watching the northern skies for the prearranged signal, as at the previous attack, a single flaming arrow sent high into the sky. It was not long in coming, and we charged the walls of Fort Greenwall. This battle was more difficult in both scale and tactics. Fort Dunstad had been in a valley, and some of our troops had been able to station themselves higher up on the valley walls to shoot down and into the walls. Here, at Greenwall, we had no such advantage. The fort was situated both directly on the road and at a rise, where it held a commanding downward look for the Stormcloak archers to make use of. I realized quickly that trying to shoot them from range was not going to work for the legions. I gathered the men who were nearest me, and we made a mad charge right up to the walls themselves, taking away their archer advantage without giving up our own ability to hack any Stormcloak who emerged from the gates to pieces. From there, we gained entry through the gate, and the few of us left in that mad charge took the walls, discovering that most of the fort had, for reasons unknown, poured themselves through the north gate and were engaging our forces there with no thought for the south side, where I had led the charge from, which gave me and the men the advantage that the Stormcloaks had given up. In less than an hour, it was done. The Stormcloak bodies were draped over the battlements and sprawled across the bloodied ground, but Fort Greenwall was under the Imperial banner. With the fighting over, I discovered that I was the ranking member of the legions among the survivors, so I took some time to organize the men, get watches manned, and messages sent off. We had gotten ourselves more or less situated when the pigeon courier returned with the legate's reply. Legion on its way to secure Greenwall. Return to Solitude and report to General Tullius for further tasking. I found a sergeant who was more or less respected among the remaining men and placed him in charge. With Legate Rika on her way, the fort will be in good hands shortly, and Riften will likely fall before midday tomorrow, I departed immediately for Solitude by way of Whiterun once again. I didn't get far, however, before a massive and instantly recognizable roar echoed across the countryside. I was getting all too used to hearing it, and I turned immediately and ran for the walls of the fort where the Legion was already mustering yet again. Another dragon swooped up the steep walls of the rift, overflew Shore's Stone, and was on us almost before we were set for it. The beast did not find itself confused in a garden, nor did it fight on the ground until near its end. Freezing attacks of watery breath rained down upon us, even as we tried to shoot through it to tear apart its wings. We lost many good men to the Stormcloaks only a few hours before. We lost yet more to the dragon's wrath. Had the Stormcloaks been in a position to see our dire straits, then I think the fort would have been retaken in just a few short minutes. When the beast finally died, there were few of us who were left. A bare handful. Worst, at least from my own view, was that when the dragon died, I was close enough that the chanting and disorientation began almost immediately. I couldn't stagger away, compelled to lay mental hold of some foreign concept, something I didn't understand, and drag it into my own head. The men saw the dragon burst into flame and wither to a skeleton, and they saw me as the cause of it. This is likely the beginning of a reputation that I do not want. Reputations make you a target. Then again, the Dark Brotherhood is already trying to kill me, so how much more of a target can I become? After ensuring that the remaining survivors were still able to hold the fort, I assured them that help was on the way, and once again left Fort Greenwall for Solitude. The remainder of the day was peaceful, though I am almost certain I heard the shriek of a dragon out over the southern valley of Eastmarch. I never saw one in the skies. Even the animals in the area seemed more inclined to remain in their dens, burrows, or whatnot, meaning that I was free to just enjoy the scenery and think on the events of the last month. Yes, the last month, for today it has been a full month since I took that fateful first step out of Windhelm's gates. I feel I am growing closer to my goal, closer to the end of Ulfric Stormcloak. Only one more Jarl supports him, assuming that the Legate is successful in occupying and taking control of Riften in the next day or so. The remaining hold, Winterhold, will be a challenge of its own. Like Windhelm, the city, what's left of it, is in constant snow and ice. Plus, it is on the side of a crumbling mountain that plunges straight down into the Sea of Ghosts. Taking it will be a challenge. But that is for the future. I set up my camp at the bottom of the Valtheme Falls, and fell asleep almost instantly. 18 Hearthfire, 4th Era, 201. The towers of Valtheme already crawl with new residents. Another round of bandits. I was able to sneak through the site relatively quickly, though I had to silence 3 of them to do so. I'm not sure why the Oh. Yes, the war. It seems that the war will be a bit of an excuse for not doing almost anything where the guard is concerned. That isn't fair to them, I suppose. It is a genuine and real problem, but it doesn't help the travelers any. Having passed through them, I continued towards Whiterun. I'd seen a rather impressive-looking set of architecture near the road the last few times I had passed through, and decided to take a closer look. My first hint that there were problems afoot for me were when the skeletons came around the corner. After that, it was a brief fight between me, 2 necromancers who were still rubbing the sleep from their eyes, and the few minions they could conjure up. At the top, I found the reason for their residence. The ritual stone, another of the 13 standing stones. As I had the 3 near Riverwood, I touched this one and felt its power radiate through me. I'm not sure what, supposedly, its power is, but if necromancers are interested, I would suppose it has something to do with the dead. I passed Right Run just before midday and continued on without stopping. I imagine I can get as far as Rorikstead, possibly Dragon's Bridge, depending on conditions, and so far the day seems a good one for travel. There is a peace in the air, something I've not felt since I left Windhelm. Not that I ever felt peace there, but I didn't have to worry about local wildlife or bandits, at least. Maybe Ulfric does at least one thing right, even if accidentally, after all. Rorikstead came into view mid-afternoon, and apart from a few other travelers on the road, the journey continued to be peaceful. This is what Skyrim could be, should be, under Imperial control. Yes, the Aldmeri Dominion has a hand in this as well, but I see the writing on the wall where they and the Thalmor are concerned, just as I did with the Stormcloaks. They too shall have their day. But first thing is first. Remove Ulfric. Restore the peace we should have. Then see how to remove the next blight from our empire. I continued on, pushing for Dragon's Bridge. The Four Shields Tavern is a small, unassuming place in Dragon's Bridge. It doesn't have the flash or the finishing that the Skeever does, but it doesn't charge you outrageously to sleep there either. I concluded a nice and relaxing day of travel there, just a few hours short of solitude. I will report to the General when I arrive, and see what the recent news of the war is, and where I am needed. 19 Hearthfire, 4th Era, 201. The sky opened up and poured rain on me most of the trip to Solitude. Entering, I was surprised by how little anyone there seemed to be even aware of the war and its progress. Indeed, there were some few who denied there was even one in progress. Denial? Or perhaps the Empire is doing what it can to make this seem more of a small skirmish instead of an all-out war. Either way, I am unsure what to make of it. The maps are looking better. The rift has indeed fallen, and all that remains of Stormcloak's supporters is the Jarl of Winterhold. The General, in recognition of my efforts in the rift and the following events at Fort Greenwall, has again promoted me, this time to Tribune. I have the next day or two for my own pursuits to allow me to recuperate, but then I am to report to the camp in Winterhold. The General expects that the hold will fall quickly. Indeed, it may fall before I arrive, in which case I am to take my orders from Legate Ricca on arrival. Which leaves me, today anyhow, for myself, or almost. I have a promise to keep to a Khajiit, and with free time, the Bard's College would seem to be where I must go. I thought finding a Khajiit at the Bard's College would be a long shot. I did not expect to find one, and yet, in the upper rooms, I did. Not the one I sought. This one was Nanak, and was notable for both his scathing sarcasm and the fact that his speech patterns are not the typical third-person Khajiit style. He did recall the one I was looking for, however, especially his obsession with the Dwemer. According to Nanak, Makara's brother left the town rather abruptly after reading something from a book in the basement. Naturally, I went down to find the book and some clue as to where he might have gone. By the time I get that information to Makara, she will likely be well enough to travel herself, and giving her a hand up to follow just seems the right thing. I spent the day at various places. I bought some materials and worked both steel and iron, which I believe has provided me the best advancements I've had yet in understanding the art of the smith. It's still paltry work, of course, but I'm starting to understand how to work those materials, along with leather and hide, far better than I ever did before. Not, of course, that this would take much, given I knew almost nothing. Done at the smithy, I went then to the alchemist's, where I used all of the ingredients I had handy. I'm getting better here, but still seem to be lacking some knowledge of how to truly make these health potions potent. Mine will help stave off disaster, but they won't save someone who is fading fast, and that bothers me. Again, more practice and I will get there. On the upside, I was also able to sell most of my other experiments to the shopkeeper, which made up for the materials I bought at the smith's, and then some, which I then spent at the Fletcher's, topping off my supply of arrows that I cannot as yet make at the smith. A busy afternoon, with plenty of coin left to be taken advantage of at the Winking Skeever this evening. How that place remains in business with such prices is beyond me. 20 Hearthfire, 4th Era, 201. Seeing no reason to remain in solitude for the next 2 days and lose even more money to the outrageous prices of the skeever, I left Solitude early in the morning. The journey was uneventful, apart from having to stave off the cold. The Winterhold camp was situated just on the far side of the mountains from Dawnstar, on the edge of a giant glacial drift. You could see the towers of the College of Winterhold in the distance, and by extension, the edges of the city of Winterhold itself. There would be no stealth approaches, no surprise attacks from them here, which at least meant I'd be able to sleep a little better tonight. I am assuming that there won't be anything for me to dash to this evening, so I am somewhat looking forward to taking a load off and warming myself by the fire tonight. There really is nothing quite like a campfire. It would appear that I was wrong in my assumption. Indeed, the coming night is going to work to our advantage if we can make it do so. The fighting here has not been going well, Legatrica has informed me. The men aren't used to the cold and terrain, whereas the Stormcloaks and Winterhold Guard have been using it to their advantage. As a result, many of our men have been captured in the last 2 days. They have, however, made a rather large, possible mistake. Like most of the holds, there is one major fortification that, if taken, can be used to control the entire area. In Winterhold's case, that would be Fort Kastav. Until recently, a major necromancer hive. And Stormcloaks must have really taken a beating taking that fort, and they were welcome to it. Until now, of course, when the Empire plans to take it. The mistake, you see, is that all of our captured men are in that fort, and the scouts have already located a more clandestine way into the interior. The plan is for me to get to the fort during nighttime hours, use this secret entrance, break out our men and arm them, and then storm the remaining Stormcloaks from the inside of the fort. The last place, generally speaking, one would expect the attack to come from. The remainder of the Legion will be nearby, waiting for indications of battle to assist us, allowing us to catch the defenders between us. No subterfuge, like Dawnstar, no blackmail, as in Riften, just a straight fight. Skill against skill alone. Not my favorite setup, but I think the Legate is correct about our odds.